Wasabi wallet. Unfairly private.
What's up, everyone? Ben with the BTC Sessions here, and this is your daily session.
Hodl that Bitcoin.
Before we dive in, of course, shout out to sponsors of the show, LEDN.io. This is where you can use your Bitcoin for a few different services, one of which is to earn more Bitcoin on your Bitcoin with their savings account. Second of which is Bitcoin-backed loans. So if you're in a pinch, you need to get your hands on dollars, but you maybe don't want to sell your Bitcoin, well, this could be an option for you. You can use your Bitcoin as collateral to get Canadian or US dollar loans. And finally, if you're a huge Bitcoin bull, you can check out their B2X offering, which gives you double the exposure to the price of Bitcoin. If you want to check out any of these, there's a link down below. And if you opt to get a Bitcoin-backed loan, they will actually give you a credit of an additional $50 worth of Bitcoin. And secondly, very happy to have these guys on board with the show. Rise Wallet. This is exactly what it looks like. It is a gift card to gift anybody Bitcoin. And the way it works is there's a paired app. You pick up one of these at a store near you, scratch off the back, scan the QR code. It immediately creates you a brand new personally held Bitcoin wallet and sends you a Bitcoin transaction for the face value of the card. It is super idiot proof. It's great to onboard new users. And you can find out where you can grab these if you click on the locations button on their website. It is only available in Canada at the moment, but it will be expanding soon. And if it's not available in your particular location in Canada, you can always get one ordered from coincards.ca. With that, let's dive into the news. So this came to my attention early this morning. Obviously, this happened yesterday, or in the last couple of days here, but Bitcoin.com, which is rather notorious amongst Bitcoiners for pumping Bitcoin Cash, being owned by Roger Ver, and being, let's just say, shady in the way that they represent Bitcoin because they call it Bitcoin Core, which is not accurate. It's just an implementation of Bitcoin. Anyways, they're trying to push the narrative that Bitcoin Cash is the real Bitcoin. And obviously, Bitcoin Cash splintered off into Bitcoin SV as well, which also claims to be the real Bitcoin, both of which have, Bitcoin Cash is around 3% of the size of Bitcoin in market cap, and Bitcoin SV is around I can't quite remember what the number is now, 1.3%. Anyways, they're both not Bitcoin. Anyways, so Richard Hart is an individual who was a huge Bitcoin maximalist back in the glory days of the 2017 rally. And as soon as the bear market started to hit, he capitulated and started saying, like, it's useless if it's not going up in price. And then went on to create more or less a massive Ponzi scheme, what it seems to be, called Bitcoin Hex. And a lot of it, if you don't go to the website, but if you were to be on the website, you would see that the marketing around this thing is essentially like saying that it's just going to go up, that it's going to pump, and that it's just a good way to make money based on scarcity. It's pretty ridiculous. Anyways, so he managed to he did a scheme where you could claim, if you had a certain amount of Bitcoin, or if you have Bitcoin, you can claim Hex based on how much Bitcoin you have, or you can buy Hex with Ether. And he's gotten quite a lot of money from that in the past week or so since it launched. And there's been a lot of scrutiny around it. There's some good blog posts about why it's such a scam, and how he's going to end up with a large, I think like 60% of the entire supply, plus all of the Ether that people use to buy it. Well, Bitcoin.com has listed Hex, and much to the chagrin of a lot of people even in the Bitcoin Cash community, calling out Roger Ver, why would you do this? And even Bitcoin.com CEO, you can see here, he said that it's basically out of spite because he didn't like the interview Peter McCormick from What Bitcoin did with Richard Hart. Basically, Peter went on, didn't want to discuss the coin at all, and just more or less said, hey, you're a giant scammer and everybody should know it, and then left the interview after a little while. But yeah, basically he he said that they're listing it out of spite, which is obviously a great reason to list anything. Anyways, lots of backlash on this. Even after it got listed on Bitcoin.com, it dove a further 60%. I don't know where it's at right now, but just to put it in perspective, when it launched, it was 3,000 and something sats per hex, and now it's around 3 sats. It dove 99 point something percent in the first couple of days, and I guess dove a further 60% when it got listed on Bitcoin.com. Again, I'm not quite sure where it sits right now because it's been so volatile. But yeah, okay. And so here's a little bit about how scammy this is. So critics point out, as the alleged owner of Hex's so-called origin address, Richard will control potentially 45% of the entire Hex supply just 1 year after launch. This will be achieved by claiming a constant stream of Hex tokens from various types of transactions, while Hart will also keep the ETH from purchases. Not only will Richard control close to half of Hex after the first year, but it is the first token I have seen to have its founder's perpetual self-enrichment baked into the protocol. And this was a blog-based post on Hex from a researcher known as Goldman Sachs. So I will link to this article down below. I will not be linking to Bitcoin.com or anything to do with actual Hex because I just don't want to drive more traffic to them. But hopefully you didn't dive into this. I mean, one, if you did, you would have had to have ETH, so sorry. But if you bought ETH to get Hex, not great. Also, hopefully, if you're thinking about claiming Hex because of the fact that you have Bitcoin, also maybe reconsider that because there could be privacy issues there. So in order to claim Hex, you have to prove that you own Bitcoin. And in doing so, you could be actually just proclaiming that to God knows who, and you don't know where that information is kept. And then when you go to trade your Hex for something else, if you choose to do so, again, there's the implications of, okay, well, now that you've put this Hex on an exchange, that means that you also had the Bitcoin that was needed to claim that Hex. And even just further outside of that, there could be some tax implications, mostly with the people that claimed at the very top. Depending on the jurisdiction, that could be considered income at the time of receiving it. So if you claimed Hex at the moment when it was like 3,000 and something sats, and then it dove 99%, it wouldn't matter if it dropped in value because the income that you got was at the top value, and you still would owe tax on the entire amount regardless of the current value of it. And that's not a blanket statement worldwide. It could vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, but I plan on just leaving well enough alone. I don't even touch these airdrops anymore. It's just, to me, not really worth it. Anyways, let's move on. So last week we saw Bottlepay, which is a custodial lightning tipping service, shut down because they are based in the UK, and there's some regulations coming into effect as of January 10th of next year that would require massive overreach when it comes to AML KYC, or anti-money laundering, know your customer laws. It would have required to them to collect a rather ridiculous amount of information on behalf of their customers, which would have made the service completely useless as far as just inconvenience. Plus, they felt that they didn't want to have to collect that type of information on their users in the first place, and they'd opted to, rather than have the service hobble on in this awful fashion, they just shut it down. And so Bottlepay is closing down, unfortunately, at their own decision. They could have tried, but it just wouldn't have been the same. Well, 2 more crypto firms are shutting down due to these upcoming rules. One of them is called Simplecoin, and the other one is called Chopcoin. And so Let's see. Here's a couple of the quotes from SimpleCoin. They said, "When the laws come into effect, we would be forced to require you, the users, to identify yourselves for anti-money laundering purposes. Mining should be available to anyone, and we refuse to jeopardize our users' privacy. It remains to be seen what impact this will have on mining pools and the cryptocurrency space as a whole." And Chopcoin said, "Since we started operating in September 2015, we've been giving away approximately 30 Bitcoin and introduced thousands of new users to the decentralized revolution. We built a community of dedicated supporters and kept innovating after we pioneered the idea of competitive Bitcoin gambling." So it's an online gambling site enabled through Bitcoin. "Unfortunately, regulatory concerns and rejecting to force KYC on our users force us to close Chop." So basically, they both opted to close their services rather than go through with these kind of draconian rules that are coming down the pipeline. So what I imagine we will see with stuff like this is, okay, well, UK-based businesses that don't want to do this are going to shut down, but who picks up slack? People in jurisdictions where the regulations aren't as onerous. So what I'm hoping is we'll see the equivalent of Bottlepay pop up somewhere totally different. The other two I'm not super familiar with, but I imagine you've just got to imagine that elsewhere, somewhere on the globe, somebody's going to say, "Oh, hey, these guys can't offer it, but it's borderless, censorship-resistant money. I can offer it where I'm from," and just open up shop there. So I'd love to see, especially with Bottlepay, I'd love to see somebody like BTC Pay Server or some other company that's kind of in the Lightning space to pick up that slack and say, hey, like maybe we can, or for Bottlepay to open source everything they were doing and just say, hey, somebody else take it. But I guess we will see. Moving on. So Quadriga collapsed at the beginning of the year with the alleged, and I say alleged because of this story, alleged death of its CEO and founder, Gerald Cotton. But there was a lot of question around, did he actually die? The circumstances seemed odd, given that he was in India and died from complications from Crohn's disease, which is not something you hear often, and the fact that, you know, a couple $100 million was just gone. And so the creditors for Quadriga CX have requested that the body be exhumed so that they get proof that Gerald Cotton is indeed dead. To be honest, I'm surprised that this request took so long because there was such a large amount of controversy around it. I guess I don't know. I don't know how this is going to go. I do kind of lean towards thinking that he has passed away. But I mean, the money is just gone. I mean, they found evidence of it, you know, him having done things with it, like pulling off people's funds and more or less gambling with it on other exchanges. The widow of Gerald has since had to give up a number of assets to help make creditors as whole as possible. So I mean, it's already been over a year since he passed away. So it was December 9th of 2018. So we'll find out what happens with this, but rough. I do feel for anybody that had money on Quadriga, but it just looks like things just kind of got out of hand. It looks like he may have started playing with people's money when he shouldn't have, and it just snowballed and got out of control, and then it just became this just a giant disaster. Anyways, let's move on. I just wanted to end on one last note here. So, of course, we see this. So there was a pyramid scheme called Paycoin. It's not Paycoin. God, I can't even remember what it was called. Anyways, there were a few schemes that have been going on through the year that have since started dumping Bitcoin on exchanges that they've gotten from their victims. Now, this one has been, arresting lots of different suspects in this, but the the Bitcoin that has been obtained from investors in these schemes continues to be, there's obviously people still out there dumping those coins. And because of that, we've obviously seen a continued slide, and I'm sure for other reasons as well. We've seen a slide since June of this year where we peaked around, we got pretty close to 14K. So it's down about 50% since that point. But I'd like to just point out those that have been looking at this kind of slide for the second half of the year. A year ago, around this time, we were $3,100. We're well over double that still. We're, at the time of recording this, we're over 7K. We're 7,100, somewhere in that range. Even with significant drops from here, we're still well above where we were a year ago. So it's often that you see charts like this pop up in the media where it's, they're outlining 6 months of price, where if they just zoomed out a little bit, you'd see significantly, it's still, the trend line is up. And even when you account for the all-time high, that was very, very, it was a very narrow time frame that you could have gotten in at that. There's very few points, especially if you were doing dollar cost averaging, you're still doing very, very well for yourself. It's the people that wait until they see it breaking new highs and dive in and then freak out when it's dipping like it has for the past 6 months and start selling. The people that bring in emotion to the equation and don't have a plan in the first place tend to be the ones that get hurt the most. So when in doubt, zoom out. And I'm quite happy with what has happened over the year. I remember last year in October and November, if somebody digs up the tweets, great. But I remember saying that around this time next year, we'll be stoked to be sitting at like 5 or 6K or something like that. And some people shit on me for saying that, but then we proceeded to drop by half because we were around 6K then. We proceeded to drop by half down to 3,000 or 3,100. What I didn't anticipate was the crazy boom that we had in June, which in turn makes the price of 7K not seem as exciting as it would have if it had just been kind of a gradual rise. But yeah, that sudden pump, I think, may also have been in part to these Ponzi schemes that have been milking people for money. It pushes up demand. So those are the kinds of things that you can't really anticipate. Sure, they'll pop up from time to time, but you never know how big they're going to be and how much more demand it's going to drive, and thus the dumping afterwards, what's going to happen with that. So these are things that can't be anticipated. But in general, if I look back, this is kind of where I anticipated us being by the end of 2019. I think 2020 will be pretty favorable. And by the end of next year, early 2021, I think we're going to be seeing returns to our previous highs and beyond, because remember, halving is in May, and that pinch, once it's felt over the next year or so after, it tends to drive manias, or at least it has in the past. I suppose things could be different this time, but if I had to throw out a wild guess, that's what it would be, is that by the end of next year and the beginning of 2021, we're going to see a return to our previous all-time highs, and then craziness ensue. Because you know what's going to happen is the second that the previous all-time high is breached, Bloomberg Crypto is going to be tweeting out those charts being like, all-time high is going to, and then like all the crazy predictions will come out, which will probably, some of them will come to fruition, and it will just be absolute insanity. And, mom and pop retail, every person and their grandmother will pile in, and that will drive the next insane rally. And think of how many new on-ramps have been created and how much more accessible everything is. Yeah, it could get wild. So we'll see. But I think we're solidly in the halfway point between all-time high, bottom, and all-time high. So like I feel like We're probably about 2 years out from the next peak, but we'll see. Anyways, I'm going to wrap it there, guys. Thank you very much for watching. Of course, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and share. Always hit share. It's great to have new people here. If you want to help the show in another way, you can hit up the sponsors down below that I mentioned before, LEDN and Rise Wallet. And of course, while you're down there, check out Wasabi Wallet. It is great to have some privacy on your coins. It's good to break those links and keep private eyes away from your confidential monetary transactions. And other than that, if you really like what you saw, you can always drop me a Bitcoin Lightning Network tip at my tippin.me page. Link for that down below as well. And I will see you guys next time for your daily session.